Hello, everyone. I hope you had a wonderful Adha, and I hope that you're doing well today. So today we have a beautiful session by Tarja on accessibility in game design. So Tarja is going to talk to us a bit about the things that you've worked with and stuff. So I'll just leave the floor to you and, enjoy.
Yeah. So hi, today we are talking about accessibility uh, in game design, or more like the whole game development, because accessibility and inclusion are something really, really close to my heart, really important to me. As myself, I'm chronically ill and disabled, but it's not something that really affects on my gaming experiences so much, but still it's part of my work in everything I do to kind of spread awareness. And now that we are talking more and more about accessibility in general in game development, I think it's something everyone who is starting their studies or starting their career, they should consider straight from the start to do more inclusive games, to have wider audience that way, and in general to make games better for all people to enjoy. And just a little bit about myself. So I'm Tarja Porkka-Kontturi. I live in northern Finland. And we are having summer right now, but it's not, it's kind of cool here. We have like 20 plus 20 Celsius degrees and thunderstorms. And so we are cozy here in northern Finland. And I have many roles. I wear pretty many hats, but my main role is at Global Game Jam. I work as Director of Communications, and then I do account managing and PR work at games branding, mostly for indie games, but we have also AAA titles in our categories. And I do, as entrepreneur, also diversity, inclusion, accessibility work. I do consultation for game companies and other businesses. And at VN Games Finland, which is organization that aims to again spread awareness about different kind of inclusion in the games industry. I'm vice president there, and so it's kind of accessibility is something that somehow is always present in everything I do. And you can find me from Twitter if you have further questions, or if you have something you would want to work together on, or if you would like to have advice also. So first of all, what is accessibility? I love the kind of the description that accessibility is willingness to create opportunities and create that kind of opportunities that help people to overcome obstacles, different kind of obstacles in daily situations. So no matter what kind of like how able we are, either bodily or mentally, we would be able to have the same opportunities, or at least like fair opportunities. And as we usually associate accessibility to physical places, such as accessible ramps for wheelchair users, or wide doorways that are easy to go through, or tactile surfaces, and so on. But what is really, really important to remember always, that accessibility should be always present in all aspects of life, including digital ones. And that's where the games come in picture. Games are like constantly growing medium and entertainment sector. So we have more and more gamers, which means that we have like more and more diverse audience of gamers. And as game developers, we should always consider that we are thinking, like we are having those differently abled people in our mind when we are designing a game. And what does that accessibility mean in games, especially? Well, accessible design is process in which those different needs of different kind of people, especially disabled folks, are considered. So you are thinking like you are taking something in your game development process, for example, some art guidelines, and you are considering accessibility measures in those guidelines, what you should add that your art would be more accessible. And accessibility in games is giving as many players as possible the best possible opportunity of completely experiencing the game you have been creating. And like you are the artist, you are like the engineer of the experience. And isn't that kind of obvious that you want as many people as possible to enjoy your creative work? And this is accessibility in games. And Ayala has this nice quote on their website saying that if UX designers and game developers want to foster inclusivity, they need to start creating different ways to access and navigate games. And I'm so happy we have been seeing this past, like, let's say 3-4 years. We have been seeing more and more accessibility options, or just like in general accessible design in games. It's something I wish it becomes a norm at some point, but we still have a long way to go there. But we have seen many examples of like bigger titles. For example, Forza Horizon got some really awesome accessibility options in it, and we have accessibility awards. Like we have game awards prizes that award accessible design and accessible options in games. And that's step 2, like making it a norm to consider accessibility when you are developing a game. And yeah, something to think about at starters, like where do you start? Why we are doing this? Why would I want to make my game accessible? What it even means? Why it's important? Like, what are you talking about, right? So game is always a shared experience. That might sound weird, but why this is said is because your game can be a single player campaign that people play alone, or it can be battle royale, but nevertheless, it's always an invitation to connect with your creativity as game designer or game developer and your ideas. Like you are introducing your ideas and your creativity, and you are inviting people to experience it, connect with it, and kind of like give some kind of feedback, or that feedback can be just something they are feeling when they are playing your game. So that you make your game more accessible means that you are extending that invitation for people to respond your idea and your creativity and your creative work to a wider, like much wider and way more diverse audience, which means that your game will have more players. And I would call that win-win situation in all cases. And why it matters, why we are talking about it so much. Like sometimes people tell me that like stop it already. Like we are tired of hearing it. I won't stop it because it's something so important. And if you, even if you were like kind of not able to understand or like empathize, or even if you weren't interested in inclusive and accessible design, you can think of numbers, because when you have wider audience, you earn more money. So that's something, at least that's something that businessmen understand if they don't want to understand the like the aspect of inclusivity. And accessibility means avoiding those all like really unnecessary barriers that prevent people from enjoying your creative output, which is game in this case. It doesn't matter what kind of impairment they have, but if there is barriers that you haven't been considering and trying to remove, they won't be able to enjoy your game. And okay, this is United States statistics, but I was never really able to find statistics for other parts of world, which is sometimes a common problem. But if we think that there's 46 million disabled gamers in United States alone, and these statistics come from able gamers. If there's already 46 million gamers who need these accessibility things to be considered, think about how many people, how many gamers there actually are when you take all the regions in the world. And there are also a lot of other conditions that aren't like so-called registered disabilities, but they still hit barriers. And those can be, I tell a bit more detailed about them further here, because different kind of conditions that affect ability, even if you weren't disabled, are, for example, reading skill. Not everyone has, like not everyone is fluent in reading, and that should really be considered. We shouldn't try to be, like we can be poetic. I love poetic games, and we can have poetic narratives, but we should try to make it in a simpler, like more simple way to consider these people who might not have so high reading skills. And red-green color deficiency is really common condition that should always be one of the guidelines you consider, like avoid those certain hues and colors when you are designing. It's something quite simple to add in your design, so please consider always that. And then there's temporary impairments such as broken arm, but then that's another thing. That's more about, well, it's about design as well. When we don't make games design too complicated, we are then considering also these temporary impairments. But there's also, of course, a different kind of controllers and other like equipments you can use when you have this kind of like physical impairment. And for example, just playing in noisy room, or playing in a room where the sunlight hits straight to the screen. Sometimes you can't affect those conditions where you are gaming. It might be that you have only, for example, one game console and one TV as its screen, and you have to use it in your living room. And there's like many examples. So if you go that far that you are able to even a little bit consider also those things when you are designing your game and developing, you are getting to really high levels of accessibility. And the most important one, like the kind of the theme or the like the tagline of the whole thing is that there's no typical gamer. There's no such thing as like this is the gamer. Like we can't make that kind of like description. So always try to think how many, like we can't please everyone. That's of course like nobody expects that. And you can't always apply all those accessibility options or all those guidelines, but you can try. And I promise that you are able to apply so many of them, and it makes people feel good. I guess that's the most important thing. You get to share your creative work with so many happy people when you are considering these like kind of small things, like things that look small to you maybe, but they make a huge difference for people who have problems when they are just trying to enjoy their favorite hobby. And this kind of like few points, like you could kind of like screenshot and keep in your mind always, like those bit of like main points, I would say at the start. That always create an accessibility checklist to follow. You can find those a game accessibility guide. I have some links later on. And you can, for example, download accessibility checklist sheet from certain websites and just like check boxes, what I'm able to do with my design. And then check the boxes that, okay, I've been doing this, I've been doing this. Could I apply this and could I implement this? And identify those critical accessibility requirements for your project. Just write them down straight to design documents or like your art guides and so on. And apply an accessible and inclusive design approach to your work as a creator. That's like a no-brainer. This is what I'm talking about all the time, but I just wanted to put it there because it's just like you have to, it doesn't, it's not enough that you're thinking about it and that you know about it, but you have to also apply and implement. And design and develop all those features in your game using an inclusive design approach. And when you know what is inclusive design approach, you can better start to consider those things. And implement accessibility review. This is really important. And feedback cycles throughout the whole development of the game. So like ask help. If you feel like, if you are unsure, and even if you felt that, okay, I got this, still consult people. If possible, try to get, for example, disabled people to play your game and give feedback. And have someone to take a look, for example, someone with visual impairments or hearing impairments to take a look at your game and listen to their feedback, because they are the professionals in this. They know what they are talking about. And maintain a focus. That's important, as in like everything we do when we are in development process. don't drop the accessibility approach as your project needs start emerging and your scope starts to get larger. You are implementing new features. Always try to keep the focus. I know it can be really tricky, but still, like, do your best. And so when we talk about disabilities, we should consider at least the following limitations, which are motor and physical, and then cognitive, visual, and hearing. Those are like the basic four you should always take in consideration. And when we talk about motor, it means controls and mobility. And I'm just giving, like, these are very basics. I'm just giving like basic points. You can, like, as you start to understand the accessible and inclusive approach better, you can go like and dive like so much deeper and make so many like decisions in your design that take it your accessibility consideration even further. But these are the main points. And first one is, well, I would say it's the most important when you talk about motor. So you should always allow your controls to be remapped and reconfigured. That people would be able to, like, for example, how you hold a controller. You can hold it in really different way than someone else. And same with mouse and keyboard. So just like allowing controls to be remapped makes absolutely a difference. And that's not so hard to implement. So always try to do that at first. And ensure that all areas of the user interface can be accessed using the same input method as the gameplay. So you don't cause kind of chaos and confusion. And include an option to adjust the sensitivity of controls. And this we can always, like, I think, okay, now I can't think of any game that wouldn't have this. But of course, there probably is games that wouldn't have a sensitivity adjustment controls. But this is something, like, again, pretty easy to implement, but makes a huge difference. And it's really, really important. Like I said, if you play FPS games, even there you can, like, instantly, the first thing you do when you go to new FPS game, you go to adjust the sensitivity things that you get for sniping and, and ensure controls are as simple as possible. Okay, like, simple doesn't mean bad. Simple means good. Like, don't try to make some magic tricks there. Or if you want to do magic tricks, then provide a more simple alternative for those controls. You can have both. It's like, that's fine too. So people can choose. They can take the more tricky way, or they can take the simpler way and be able to enjoy your product. And ensure that all the interactive elements, things you can pick, doors you can open, and virtual controls are large, not like that there's some small rock you have to see from the corner that is in the shadows. Like, it's just frustrating overall. But they are large, they are well spaced, and especially if you are designing a game on small or touch screen, such as mobile game. And include toggle or slider for any haptics. So people can just, like, I hate like, okay, I don't hate haptic feedback, but I start to hate it at some point if I play. I have those like gaming marathons sometimes, because like when I work on weekdays, then on weekends I might play 6-7 hours straight. Don't tell anyone. And those moments are when I really don't want the haptic feedback. It starts to annoy me and it starts to overwhelm me. And I have some like sensitivities. For example, I'm hypersensitive for some lights and some materials. Like if some certain material is touching my skin, it makes me like irritated. And same thing with haptic feedback. So always, like, if you want to add it in your game, which is really cool, so many gamers love that, and it's amazing invention, but make sure that it's possible to turn off, or at least lower. And Overwatch remapping is one really cool example of what I talked there, because here you can remap the controls for like all the heroes you are playing. Those who have been playing Overwatch know this already, but you can see the screenshot here from the option screen, where you are able to remap basically everything important. This is now about controller playing, but still. And then cognitive, which means thought, memory, and processing information, like our cognitive abilities, which vary a lot. Like even if you are like completely healthy, you can be really tired. Like I'm now, I'm really, really tired for some reason today. Or might be because we played League of Legends almost all night with my children. So that can contribute to my tiredness, but still. So first thing I want to mention is that allow the game to be started without the need to navigate through multiple levels of menus. That when you open up the, like when you boot up the game, please don't make that kind of menu where you have to, like when you press a button, it just takes you to another menu, and it takes you to another menu, and it goes on, and it takes you like 15 steps to get in a game lobby, because that's so unnecessary. And if you want to do that, provide an option for quick play. And here I want to, like, when I say don't do that, or hey, do this, it doesn't mean that you can't have two alternatives. You can have two different options. So like you don't have to limit yourself as creative, but you are just like, you are bettering your work by providing the option. It's not that, like, I never would want to say that you have to do this and at the same time you have to somehow compromise your artistic views. No, you can do, like, you can do as you will and wish as creator, but apply the option. That's all. And something really that feels maybe self-explanatory and really like just a norm, but it's not, unfortunately. Using easily readable default font size. Like don't make people to like squint their eyes all the time, especially when you are designing for mobile devices. And as I mentioned earlier already, that use simple, clear language. Don't try to sound too fancy. You can sound poetic, and you can write beautifully, and you can have impactful written narrative without putting like too much big words and too long sentences. Like keep your sentences short. Keep them quite simple by structure. Like I'm not, you can hear it, I'm not English speaker, native English speaker at all. And I struggle with English despite it's my working language. I still struggle with it. So you can imagine how it's with people who, for example, didn't ever study the language the game is providing, because you can't always, of course, it would be amazing if you could provide localization always, but that takes a lot of money. So it's not the first thing to consider when you are developing a game. But still, even if we are speaking or reading, in this case, reading our native language, it can be to some people really difficult, and some people read slower. And when you are like just you might sometimes play your game when there's a lot of like fuss going around, or there's something happening around you, or you are maybe stressed, and you just want to chill and play. So that helps in this as well. And hand in hand with this goes a simple, clear text formatting, which makes the text again so much easier to read and comprehend. And include interactive tutorials. It's always something when you can interact with what you see on the screen, and that way like study and learn the game mechanics you are going to use when you go into the gameplay itself. It really helps when you can actually do something at the same time when you are studying those controls. Like just showing them on the screen as like static picture isn't like at all as effective as having interactive tutorial that you can play through. And this is something really important that often is forgotten, allowing players to progress through all kind of text prompts at their own pace. Like for example, allowing players to press some button that they see the next piece of dialogue or next tip or whatever it is, instead of just letting them scroll automatically. Because there's a lot of reasons why people might read slower. And like this is something that's often forgotten. And it really makes the gaming experience, I wouldn't say lesser, but not so enjoyable if you have to try to hurry and you always miss some of the text prompts. And this is, to me personally, something really important and affects a lot of gamers. Avoid flickering images and repetitive patterns. All the flashing lights that can cause migraine, that can cause epileptic seizures, all kind of neurological issues. Like this is something super important. And if you have these flashing lights or flickering images in your game, put a warning. Like maybe put it at the start of the game, and not only put the warning at the start of the game, because that could, like if you just put a general warning that, okay, this has flashing lights, this game has flashing lights, then maybe like for example, I might skip that kind of game totally. But if you tell that, okay, this game has flashing lights in this chapter, in this part of this chapter, then I can play the game because I know, like I've been warned. I know that, okay, in that part of the game have to be like extra cautious, or maybe ask someone else to play through, or if possible, make alternative route that it can be avoided totally. And here again, I think I'm repeating a lot of things, but still make it clear which elements are interactive. Like don't put that, I've talked about that rock, small rock in the shadowy corner. Don't put it there because everyone gets frustrated trying to find that kind of interactive objects. Highlight the object, have, for example, some color to indicate that this element is something you can interact with, or make it have some kind of sound, which is kind of bad if it has only sound, because then we come to those who have hearing impairments. But somehow make it clear that these elements and items are interactive. So player doesn't have to just keep guessing and getting like frustrated, and it really kind of ruins the joy of gaming, or the game experience. And allow the possibility to turn off the background movements. I think it was Apex that did this. I remember playing some game that had this really well implemented. And I think it was Apex, but I might be wrong because it's so long time ago I played it. But like, for example, if you are, let's say you are flying, jumping with some bird wings or whatever, and you are going through the air, flying through the air, make a option where all that like background movement around you can then be disabled, because it causes motion sickness to surprisingly many people, and it can even affect the same way as flickering lights and all those flashes. And this is something people discuss a lot about, allowing violent and bloody parts to be disabled. It's something like, okay, I love shooting games. I love hack and slash. I love wholesome games so much, but I also love games where you can just slaughter things. But many people have tendency to have phobia, like of seeing blood. Like they are really sensitive. It's really common phobia, phobia of blood and gore. It can cause severe anxiety to people. So why not to allow those parts to be disabled? Then those who want to see all the splatter, they are able to see it and enjoy it. And those who want to enjoy the game but don't want to see all the guts and bits, they can turn it off. Oh, and here's Civilization 5 quick start option. It's amazing. There you can go through different set of menus, but you can also just press play now. And I'm super happy that we see this in many games nowadays. This is just one example, but there's so many more of these. Where you can just like go play now and you are taken straight to lobby or even straight to queue. And vision, so our eyesight and how our brains react to things we see. So maybe the most important thing again is don't convey essential information information that you really need to know that you are able to play that game as intended, don't convey it by one color alone, because it can be, if someone has difficulties of seeing that color, or if they are colorblind totally, then they have no clue what to do. And if the game uses a field of view in like 3D games, set that kind of default that it's appropriate for expected viewing environment. Like, don't make it harder to people to see and keep up with what they are seeing. Again, pretty easy to implement if you just like remember and understand to consider it. And this is tricky, saying that, okay, avoid VR simulation sickness triggers. It can be tricky because there are many people who, no matter like how much you try to avoid those triggers, they still get symptoms. But that's completely different thing. If you are creating, for example, amusement park VR ride game, that's of course it will never suit for everyone. So like, I think you all understand where I'm going with this. But like, when you can, like, don't put unnecessary, like the guideline here is always don't put unnecessary, like difficult and bad things in your game. If you can, or let people to toggle them off, let them turn those off if you want to. If it's part of your artistic view that I have to have these flashing lights, or I have to have this swirling whatever it is that gives me migraine, I understand it and I respect it, and everyone else respects it, or they should at least respect it. But if you allow the allow players to turn that off, you are just giving something to everyone, and it's again win-win. It's not away from anyone. And super important thing, provide high contrast between text and user interface and background. That it's not like one smushy gotta like just porridge, you know, but it's easy to read, easy to understand, easy to keep up. And ensure that interactive, this is third time that I'm repeating this, but ensure that interactive elements and virtual controls are large and well spaced. Don't hide that little rock in that shadowy corner, okay? But if you want to hide little rock in shadowy corner, hide it there, but don't make it like necessary thing to be found that you are able to play the game. Make it Easter egg or something. And here again comes also, when it's about vision, the same thing, that use an easily readable default font size. Format the text clear, and that's really important part of like all the aspects when we talk about accessibility. Here's Destiny 2 example, where you can see HUD opacity presented really well. Like, it looks sleek, it looks pretty, but it's really easily readable. You can read it so easily, and it's still like, it doesn't compromise the artistic style of the game. And this is Last of Us Part 2, which got some, I don't remember which all awards it got, but it got a lot of praise from its accessibility options. For example, this high contrast mode that can be turned on, because this is like for someone who doesn't like really need this high contrast mode. I've seen a lot of comments that it looks ridiculous and it looks stupid, but it's super important. Like so many gamers have been able to play this game. It's been the first game they've been able to play for years because of this mode. So if you add something like this in your game, it makes it unique in this time and age, but let's hope it's norm sometime in the future. And one of my favorites for Honor user interface contrast, it's so well presented. You have this bright orange, you have bright blue, and both are like, you don't have only those colors. Both are outlined with white and black outlines, and health bars are really easily, just like you can see them easily and you can keep up with them so easily. And when you target the enemy, you can see the circle under them, which is really dizzying. So this is kind of the big design. And then there's hearing. Again, most important thing. And this goes also when you are, for example, making content for your social media for your game. Because, as marketing person, I always think about those aspects as well. So put alt texts, or if you make videos, put subtitles for all important speech. And if possible, provide subtitles for all speech, not only the most important, but all. Because sometimes it helps even like, for example, if I'm playing evening time, I don't have hearing impairments. But if I'm playing at evening time, I don't want to like blast the volume full. So I often turn captions on and subtitles. And it helps me to keep up with the game. But subtitles are something you should always, like whatever content you are creating for marketing purposes and so on, always provide subtitles. It sounds like a small thing, but again, I keep repeating this, it makes a huge difference. And it gives wider audience like ability to understand what you're doing there. And provide separate volume controls for speech and background and music, so that everyone can, this can be some, like if you are making a small indie game, it can be difficult to implement. Oh no, well, it's not that difficult if you just, it might feel difficult, but it's not. But this alone, like providing separate volume controls or mutes, it really improves the gaming experience for so many players. And here is the same thing as with color, to ensure that no essential and super important information is conveyed by sounds alone. Like I said earlier, that if there's, if you want to highlight an item that is interactive or that you can interact with, don't use only sound or only color. Like perhaps combination of them would be the best. So everyone can understand when there is an element that you can interact with. And again, those basic things with text. If you And when you, please, provide subtitles or captions, present them in a clear, easy to read way. Like try to make them big enough to pop up from the background and so on. And use signs and symbols. That's always a good idea to, like if it's possible, use symbols or signs to represent things rather than text, because it makes it easier, like easier to understand and comprehend and even remember. And here's example of Tomb Raider subtitles that are, they like, I think they look really aesthetic as well. They are so easy to see, that's easy to read, and it looks nice. It fits well in the game's environment and art style. And then speech. If you have a speech input in your game, ensure that it's not like really a requirement, but it's only kind of supplementary or maybe even alternative input method. Like don't make it a requirement to use the speech input. But of course, if you are developing game for, let's say, Alexa, this can be difficult to make happen, to ensuring that speech input is not required. But again, we aren't asking you to be a magician, so a common sense can be used there. And to avoid exclusion and bring more inclusion, provide controls and menu options for all voice commands. And including text chat. It can be controversial, but including text chat helps many players to communicate with their teammates without a need to be able to hear what they say or to be able to speak well enough or at all. And text chat can be really challenging and difficult for many ways, like for many reasons, for example, toxicity. But then again, I mentioned Apex Legends here again, because the pinging system, you can communicate with pings without the need of using either voice or text chat. And including interaction elements that understand limited vocabularies is really important, because again, don't try to be too fancy. It's just like you can be fancy without being too fancy. And here is Skyrim's connect voice commands, and those can be disabled. And this is one example of well-made. Maybe it can be a bit like, someone would say it's lame example, but it's really great example of considering speech impairments amongst gamers. And overall, when you are communicating information in your game, try to think like that you need to have more than one method, because like the gameplay critical information, the information that gamer needs to be able to actually play a game and play through, it should always be communicated in more than one method. It can be visual method, audio, text on the screen, rather all of those. So that way you ensure again that you aren't stopping someone from playing the game just because they can't understand. They simply can't understand what they should do or what should happen next. Like it just can stop the whole progression in the game. And here comes the color alone. Important information must not be communicated through color alone. And if you always try to keep that in mind, you are already applying one of the really core elements of accessible design in your work. And you can see I'm repeating again, but interactive objects must be clearly identifiable by the player. So I'm talking about the rock in the corner that you could be able to pick up and pin a fancy reward, but you can see it because it's there in the shadowy corner. Okay. And when you are explaining game settings and functionality, ensure that you are providing it when needed, that it's easily accessible, for example, in the middle of the game, that if you have to check something, you can access the settings menu straight away from the in-game. And letting players to customize the experience is crucial as well. You can, and again, you don't have to compromise your artistic choices, but just provide few extra options. And I say a lot, something must be, like here, the game's narrative structure and writing must be simple and clear. It's like it must be if you want your game to be accessible. And again, you can try to find a way where you can use your like unique, even poetic style, but in a bit like more softer and simple way, so it's enjoyable to all. Or maybe I can't remember which game was it. It was some indie game I played like a year back that had amazing, beautiful music on background, and it had. I wish I would remember the game's name. I'm sorry that I don't. But it had amazing, beautiful, like really etheric music on the background, and it had beautiful, like spoken narrative going on, but it provided captions, subtitles with more simplified narrative, like the writing. So like that ensured that players with different abilities and levels of being able were still enjoying the game and got the full experience. And it was really amazing, and I wish I just would remember which game it was. I would promote it so much. And a player must be able to review, like to go back to games, like the narrative, and instructions. You have to be able to like, please don't make player to like, don't force them to remember everything and memorize everything. Of course, some that kind of challenges are really cool. I like them myself a lot. I like things like games where I have to like memorize things, and games that don't necessarily provide a really detailed map. But I'm a bit like cuckoo like that, I guess, because most of people hate that, and it's really it's not accessible at all. So add an option where players are able to review those things, especially instructions. And just a few points about general good practices. This is like the hot topic of past 2 years, offering wide choice of difficulty levels. Should Souls games be more easy, or should they have difficulty level choices and so on? This is really like, it causes heated arguments. But in my opinion, and other accessibility professional opinions, like it's not away from anyone if you are providing wider choice of difficulty levels, because then every gamer can like pick the one stay likeness. If they want a hardcore challenge, they can choose it. If they want more cinematic, just like storytelling option, they can choose it as well. And again, it's just a win-win. You are having more players to your game, and more people are able to enjoy amazing games. So I personally really don't see the problem why you shouldn't provide those difficulty options. But as many of you possibly know, it's been a really hot topic, and like kind of source of arguments. And providing details of all the accessibility features you have in your game is really crucial. Put them on the packaging if you have physical product. If you have digital product, put them in the website, or if you have like Steam page, put them there. Make people aware of those accessibility features you are including in your game, because it really can affect the consumer's choice to speak PR and marketing language there. Like, people are making their choices often based on what kind of information they see, for example, on the game's Steam page. So if you want to kind of make it really clear that you are considering accessibility in your game design and development, and you are offering different kind of accessibility features. And even if they were only few, if you are starting up, and still make people aware. And also provide those details of those accessibility features in game. And when gamers use those features, like if they are something, for example, turning some sound off or toggling something, or make sure that those settings are saved and remembered, that they don't have to do it always when they start the game. And ask for accessibility feedback. This I mentioned earlier as well. Ask feedback. when you make playtests, when you run playtests, make sure that there is someone who have some kind of impairment or disability, so they can go those things through with you. Because it's always important to have someone someone who really is like so-called professional in the like of the subject to have their opinion voiced, and then it gives you so much better building blocks when you are designing your game, when you get that like that professional feedback, and then you can act on it. And here's one of my favorite examples, Near Automata, one of my favorite games as well. It has this simulation sickness prompt where you can just lessen the motion sickness. And I really loved that option in this game. I loved a lot of things in this game, but this was one of the really cool and important accessibility options that helped many people, including myself, to enjoy the game. And yeah, this is kind of a recap of what I've been talking about. So these simple considerations when you are designing and developing. Remapping, which means allowing controls to be remapped or reconfigured so everyone can like adjust their experience. Text size, keep it easily readable. Don't overdo it so that you can see anything else but the text, but so that you don't have to like go near to the screen to be able to see the subtitles or any text that you have in the game. And present subtitles in a clear, easy to read way, and just put the subtitles there. Use the captions. It takes a little bit more work, but it's definitely worth it. It's something that everyone can easily do. Like, it's not difficult, it's time consuming. Yes, I admit that it is time consuming, but it's still a relatively small thing you can do to remarkably improve the accessibility of your game. And those flickerings and flashings, try to avoid them. And if you can't avoid them, put a trigger warning. Tell clearly where these flashings and flickerings occur, so players can avoid them themselves. And consider color blindness by not conveying any important information in one solid fixed color only. And offer enough contrast in user interface so that text, UI, and background all can be easily seen separate from each others. And these are some, like, this could be maybe shared in chat as well. I could share the whole slides if someone is interested. I'm not sure how that would happen, but I gladly share this. There is gameaccessibilityguidelines.com, which is super good resource. It's simple. It provides you with basic, intermediate, and more advanced information. And it's something you can go to check always when you are in doubt. And then Xbox has its own pretty cool accessibility guideline, which can be found from Microsoft page naturally. And it has super important remarks. And I really suggest everyone reading that. Just take like a few hours and try to like really understand the meaning of these things and like why it's good. It's good for your business as well. It guarantees a wider audience for your product, which is game here. And practical game accessibility course by Unity. I went it through with my high schooler students, and it was really easily understandable, but it gives really good tools for you to understand these matters a bit more deeply. Great course. And then in general about why accessibility and inclusion matters in games. If you aren't familiar with able gamers, I really, really strongly and warmly recommend it, checking out what they are doing in the industry. And they have a lot of really cool resources as well that you can study further and educate yourself around these subjects. And that's it. If you have any questions, you can always email me, or you can message me on Twitter, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. And I'm always happy to mentor. And now I have really busy fall coming, but still like short sessions and some chats. I'm always happy to answer questions. And if I don't know the answer, I can find someone who knows. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Tarja. If anybody has any questions that they want to ask. Oh, I see Muhammad's already asked one. I don't know if you can see the chat.
You know, earlier I couldn't see. I was so in my.
No, don't worry about it.
Everyone.
Thank you, honestly, so much. You do have a question by Muhammad, who's asking, there are games that have photosensitivity and epileptic seizure warnings. Should those games implement an alternative or an option to remove the flashes, even if it is a main part of the experience? I think you've already answered part of that, but if you would like to.
Yeah, this is my personal opinion that, like I said, that I would never ask artists to compromise like their artistic values and views. But like, of course, if it's a main part of the experience, then it is, and then that shall be. You can't remove the main part of what you are creating. So, okay, here I would say that, yeah, you can put the warning, definitely put the warning, but you can't really maybe provide any kind of like working alternative to this kind of like in this kind of situation. Then it's just a game that is meant for like maybe a bit niche audience or like selected audience. That's completely different situation. And I don't have anything against this kind of like, sometimes not everyone likes everything and not everyone wants to even experience everything. So it should be always fine when we are talking about any kind of arts. But then you should maybe consider that, do you want to make this kind of product that wouldn't be like, there would be a lot of people who just aren't able to use it. Tricky question. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Honestly, it was a great session. If anybody has any other questions, it's now or never. Or you can, of course, email or send a Twitter DM to Tarja.
Yeah, and sometimes there might be
Okay.
like long delay if you message me, but I answer when I have time. I'm doing a lot of stuff at the moment and teaching game development side of my day job, so it's a bit like hassle these days. But still,
Well, thank you
don't
so much for
hesitate to
making
contact.
time for that.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your session. It was honestly very insightful for all of us.
Thank you for listening, everyone.
Yeah, and honestly, it's such it's so important to talk about this while we're designing games, and it's so great to have somebody to be able to talk about it to people as they're like creating. And thank you. And I hope everybody enjoyed the session. Thank you guys for joining us. People in Discord, on YouTube, I mean Zoom. And yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Tarja. Thank you, Sasha. We'll see you guys soon, I guess. All right.
Take care.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
And for those of you who are going to come to the team working session later, it's going to be at 9 with me, Ashraf, and Fuad and Mika. And yeah, hope to see you guys there. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you again.